They never wanted you to hear this part. In the bitter winter of 1957 on the edge of Philadelphia, a cardboard box lay half hidden in the brush. Inside was the body of a small boy. No shoes. No name. His skin bruised, his story erased. The papers called it a tragedy. The police called it a dead end. The public forgot it within weeks. And that was no accident. This is not just about a murder. It is about what happens when a child becomes an inconvenience to power. For 65 years they told you the mystery was only his name. When DNA finally identified him as Joseph Augustus Zarelli in 2022, they celebrated as if the case was closed. But they were celebrating the wrong thing, because this was never about who he was. It was about who wanted him to disappear. Why did no family step forward? Why did no one claim his body? Why did every investigator hit the same wall of silence? If justice was all they wanted, they would have had it decades ago. Instead, the boy became a secret, a signal to anyone who tried to look too closely. The institutions you are told to trust did not fail. They obeyed. They obeyed something higher than law and colder than mercy. They made sure this boy was buried twice, once in the ground and once in history. And I need you to understand this. If they can erase a child, they can erase anyone. They can erase you. You have lived your entire life inside systems that decide who matters and who vanishes. You were taught to see authority as protector, not predator. But what happens when those in power stop protecting you and start protecting themselves? This story is not a crime report. It is a map that shows where power hides its sins. A map you were never supposed to read. I am not here to comfort you. I am here to wake you up. Tonight you will learn how the powerful bury the truth in plain sight, and how the boy in the box was more than a victim. He was a warning. The question is, not who killed Joseph Augustus Zarelli. The question is, who needed him dead? And when you hear the answer, you will understand why they tried so hard to keep you from hearing it. Are you ready to go deeper? You need to see how fast they moved to make you forget. February 25th, 1957. A stranger walking through Fox Chase sees a dirty cardboard box discarded like trash. Inside, he finds a boy no more than 4 to 6 years old. The police arrive, and the first thing they do is measure the body, not for evidence but for fit, because the box once held a bassinet, a baby cradle. Someone bought it. Someone had a receipt. And if you could trace that receipt, you could trace the killer. But the paper trail went cold before it even started. It just vanished. That happens when someone is protecting a secret, not solving a crime. Within days, the case is national headlines. Posters with the boy's face flood. Philadelphia radio announcers call him America's unknown child. Donations pour in to pay for his burial. People weep on the streets. And then suddenly it all stops. Like a switch was flipped, leads disappear. Witnesses recant. Detectives are reassigned. The biggest manhunt the city has ever seen quietly shrinks into a box of cold files in the basement. What does that tell you? About who has the power to choke a story until it dies. Years later, retired cops admitted strange things. No fingerprint records, no proper autopsy photographs, key files missing, entire interviews never typed up. As if someone didn't just want this case unsolved. They wanted it unwritten. And here's where it gets worse. The boy's body shows signs of long-term abuse, malnutrition, restraint marks on his wrists and ankles. This wasn't random. This wasn't a one-time outburst. Someone kept him hidden, starved him, beat him, then dumped him like trash. But no one around him ever came forward. No neighbors, no doctors, no teachers. You're not looking at neglect. You're looking at control. The kind of control that scares people into silence. The deeper you go, the more it feels less like a murder and more like a message. You don't talk about certain things. You don't ask certain questions. You don't touch certain children. So ask yourself, if they could erase a little boy while the whole city was watching, what else have they erased right in front of you? And what happens when you start digging where they told you not to dig, ready to see the first layer of lies peel back? Every mystery leaves footprints. This one had plenty at first. Two separate people claim they saw the same thing. A small boy wandering the woods alone in the bitter cold, too young to speak, too weak to cry. And then he was gone. Police took their statements seriously for about a day. Then the witnesses changed their story. Or maybe someone changed it for them, because when reporters tried to follow up, neither witness would speak again. That happens when silence becomes safer than the truth. Then there was the foster home just up the road, an institution for unwanted children run by people with connections in high places. Detectives quietly investigated, but every time they knocked on that door, someone else higher up told them to leave it alone. Imagine that a murdered child found minutes away from a home for abandoned kids, and they're told to look somewhere else. Files disappear. Photos vanish. Leads are buried under layers of official forgetfulness. One detective admitted years later that the boy's fingerprints were taken but somehow never processed. Another said hair samples simply couldn't be found. Evidence doesn't evaporate on its own. It has help, and you have to ask yourself, why would anyone in power help hide the death of a child? Unless exposing the truth would reveal something far worse than murder. The boy was emaciated. His body bore the marks of systematic abuse. Someone owned him. Someone used him. Someone wanted him disposed of with no name and no memory, and they were important enough to make police walk away. Now think about this. If a poor man had done it, he'd be in prison before sunset. If a stranger had done it, the city would have burned to find him. But when no one is ever charged, when no family ever steps forward, when every road is blocked by invisible hands, you're looking at a predator with protection. The closer you look, the colder it gets. This wasn't just a boy leg, feet in a box. This was a secret buried in one, and those who buried it have spent decades making sure you never open it. But we're about to open it right now. And once you see what's inside, you'll wish you hadn't, ready to go deeper into the first real suspect they never wanted you to know about. They say every crime leaves a shadow, but in this case every shadow was swept away before anyone could trace it. The first real suspect wasn't a drifter or some nameless monster in the night. It was someone close, someone who should have been questioned harder. A woman from the neighborhood claimed her own mother had bought a bassinet, the same kind that Box once held. She even described how the little boy looked in detail before his body was ever shown to the public. How would she know that unless she had seen him alive? Detectives pressed her. She cracked under pressure, admitted she was making it up, but the details she invented were too sharp to ignore. Marks on his body, the way his hair had been crudely cut, things only the killer would know or someone protecting the killer. Instead of digging deeper, they called her crazy and closed the file on her family. Case solved for the department. Case frozen for history. Years later, another lead pointed to a local foster father. A man whose name has been whispered more than spoken. The boy's body was found just down the road from his property. He had the resources, the privacy, and the connections to make evidence disappear. Yet every time investigators tried to tie him to the case, someone higher up told them to back off or lose their badge. That's the kind of power you're dealing with here. Not street crime, not random violence. This is what it looks like when the system itself becomes an accomplice. Reports vanish. Interviews never filed. Witnesses who want to talk suddenly move away or end up dead. This isn't sloppy police work. This is controlled erasure. And the most chilling part, the boy's autopsy showed he'd been fed right before death after weeks of starvation. Someone wanted him barely alive long enough to make him suffer before the end. That isn't neglect. That's ritualistic cruelty. Ask yourself, who treats children like disposable property? Who has the influence to make lawmen look away from a child's corpse? And what kind of secret do you have to be hiding to risk everything to keep it buried? We're going to rip off another layer, the part where this case stops looking like murder and starts looking like a message. Are you ready to see how deep this rabbit hole goes? If you follow the trail long enough, it stops looking like a single killer and starts looking like an institution. Something organized, something protected. Some investigators whispered about an underground network that moved children like property. Back then, nobody wanted to believe it. Today we know better. How many stories have surfaced about orphanages and homes hiding decades of abuse? How many powerful men quietly resigned before the truth ever hit the news? This case reeks of the same stench. The boy's body told its own story. Not just bruises and malnutrition, but a pattern. Deliberate injuries done over time. Like someone was testing how much pain he could take. This wasn't a beating. This was training, or worse, ritual. And then there's the cardboard box itself. It wasn't random. It came from a high-end store that didn't sell to just anyone. Detectives traced it to a single shipment, and the buyers on that list included people whose names you still recognize today. People who fund campaigns, own companies, shape laws. When one rookie cop tried to pull those records, he was pulled off the case overnight, transferred to another district, and told never to speak of it again. Ask yourself why a nameless boy mattered so much to people with that kind of power. Why not just call it an accident and walk away? Unless the truth behind his death would rip open something bigger than anyone wanted to face. And here's the detail almost no one talks about. The body was posed, arms carefully crossed, legs tucked as if someone wanted him displayed, not discarded. The medical examiner called it odd but insignificant. But nothing about staging a corpse is insignificant, especially when other unsolved child cases from that era show eerily similar positioning. Coincidence? They want you to think so, but too many coincidences make a pattern, and patterns are messages, messages for those who know how to read them. Now here's where it gets darker. There's evidence the spot where the box was found wasn't chosen by chance. The placement aligns with something ancient and unsettling, and if I show you what that means, you'll never look at a map of Philadelphia the same way again. Look at a map of Philadelphia from above. Now mark where the boy in the box was found, just off Susquehanna Road, near an abandoned lot no one cared about in 1957. Now here's the part the reports never mention. Plot the locations of other child disappearances from the same decade. Cases you've probably never heard of because they were buried in the back pages of forgotten newspapers. The dots start to form something almost intentional, a shape you can trace with your finger, a shape that lines up eerily with old Masonic survey markers that have been in the city for over a century. Coincidence, they'll tell you. But it gets worse. The exact spot where Joseph was left sits on an invisible line that connects two long-demolished orphanages. Both later exposed for abuse and corruption, that line runs straight through a plot of land owned by a charitable trust whose records are still sealed to this day, sealed after 65 years. Ask yourself why. Urban legends talk about Philadelphia's hidden grid. Streets aligned to ancient designs older than the city itself. Most people laugh it off as conspiracy theory. But when crime scenes start to fall on those same invisible lines, when children's bodies are found on intersections no one can explain, it stops being funny. Detectives back then never mentioned any of this publicly, but a retired crime scene photographer admitted before he died that investigators were told not to map the locations together. Don't draw lines that don't exist, his captain told him. But they do exist. You just have to look. And if these lines are real, if these patterns are intentional, then the boy wasn't just murdered. He was placed as a marker, as a warning, or worse, as part of a ritual only a handful of people would ever recognize. What kind of ritual leaves a child in a box by the side of the road? What kind of people are so confident they can kill and still sleep tonight knowing no one will stop them, because either no one can or no one dares? We're about to pull back another layer. There's one eyewitness no one talks about, someone who saw a car that night, and the story they told could have broken the case wide open. There was one person who might have seen it all. A woman walking home that night through the freezing wind. She told police she saw a car stopped near the spot where the box was found, a pale blue sedan trunk, open driver standing in the dark. The man looked startled when he saw her, but didn't say a word, just closed the trunk and drove off. She described the car down to the license plate frame, and then something strange happened. Her statement disappeared. Not officially retracted, not disproven, just gone. When reporters asked about her testimony, years later the files had no trace of it, like it had never existed. Why would a credible eyewitness be erased from an active murder case? Because she saw the wrong man, or maybe the right man, Someone the department didn't want in the reports, someone connected enough to make evidence vanish. Decades later, an old detective finally admitted to a journalist off record that the woman was real. And she wasn't the only one. 2 separate neighbors reported seeing the same pale blue car parked there days before the body was found. Same description, same fear. Both witnesses said the driver wasn't alone. There was someone in the passenger seat watching the road waiting for something, but here's the part that chills me to the bone. That same type of car, same color, same make, same unusual bumper sticker, shows up in 2 other unsolved child cases from the 1950s. Different counties, different years, police called it coincidence. But how many coincidences does it take before it stops being random? The woman who spoke up that night was quietly warned to stop talking. She moved out of state soon after, and when a true crime author tracked her down 30 years later, she refused to go on record, said she didn't want trouble with those people. Who were those people? Who was powerful enough in 1957 to scare a witness into silence for life? And here's the most disturbing part. In a private letter she wrote before she died, she mentioned one detail no one can explain, a symbol she saw on the man's ring, a symbol police never released to the public. She said the man wore a heavy gold ring that caught the light when he closed the trunk, not a wedding band. Thicker, engraved, like a seal of office, and on that seal was a mark she couldn't forget, a triangle inside a circle cut by a vertical line. Simple, almost ordinary. But not when you know where it comes from. That symbol appears in a handful of places if you know where to look. On the cornerstone of an abandoned orphanage outside the city, on the letterhead of a benevolent society that operated in Philadelphia during the 1950s, and in one chilling photograph buried in archives, a gathering of prominent men, judges, businessmen, even a senator, all wearing that same ring. Coincidence? They will swear it is, but what are the odds that a woman sees this symbol on a rainy night, and decades later you find it stamped into hidden records and secret meeting halls? Some call it a mark of fraternity. Others call it a sigil, an oath carved into gold, a way of saying, we protect our own, no matter the cost. In every city, in every era, there are groups like this. Not just shadowy gangs in alleyways, but respected institutions in broad daylight. The kind of people who can close a file before it's even opened. The kind of people who can erase a boy's name for 65 years. This is where the story stops being about one murder and starts becoming something far worse. Because when powerful men wear the same ring, when crime scenes align with old maps, when witnesses are silenced, it stops being random. It starts to look like design. But the symbol isn't just on rings and buildings, it turns up somewhere else. In a file box marked miscellaneous that should have been shredded long ago. In that box is a photograph so disturbing, the detective who leaked it said he couldn't sleep for a week. And the photograph links Joseph not just to one man, but to an entire network. The question is, why would men in high places risk everything for a little boy in a cardboard box? Unless he wasn't just a victim, unless he was a message. The photograph was grainy, black and white, and almost ordinary at first glance. But then your eyes focus, and you realize what you're seeing. A small boy sitting in the corner of a lavish room, dressed in clothes that don't fit, looking straight at the camera with a blank expression. Behind him, men in dark suits, their faces half turned away, as if they knew this image would one day need to be denied. One of those men was wearing the ring, the same triangle in the circle, cut by the line, the same seal the witness described in 1957. But here's where it gets worse. The room wasn't random. It was identified as part of a private estate just outside Philadelphia, an estate owned by a charitable trust that ran youth programs for decades. A trust with deep political connections and a board full of names that still appear on courthouse walls today. This wasn't just one predator in the shadows. This was a network, protected by wealth, insulated by respectability, bound by shared secrets. And Joseph wasn't the only child photographed there. In the box of files there were others, faces of missing kids whose cases went nowhere, who vanished from neighborhoods without a trace, cases written off as runaways, accidents, mistakes. But they weren't mistakes. They were patterns, and every pattern points back to the same circle of men who met behind locked doors, who called themselves philanthropists, who smiled for cameras while burying their crimes where no one could dig them up. When investigators tried, careers ended overnight, promotions disappeared. Officers were reassigned, transferred, quietly forced to retire. Even the detective who leaked the photograph admitted he burned the original after copying it, said it was too dangerous to keep. What kind of evidence makes a man destroy proof just to stay alive? And here's the question you have to ask yourself. If Joseph Augustus Zarelli was too
Aiken, photographed, and silenced by men this powerful, how many other children have been swallowed by the same machine? And why, after all these years, does every trail still lead to that same estate? An estate that's not abandoned at all but quietly maintained to this day, because someone's still paying for it, someone's still guarding it, someone doesn't want you to see what's inside. Drive 30 minutes outside Philadelphia and you'll find it. Not on any tourist map, not marked with any plaque, just a long iron gate half swallowed by trees. Behind it, a winding drive leads to a mansion that looks almost asleep. Windows dark, grass perfectly cut, but no sign of life. Like someone tends it, but no one lives there. Neighbors say the place is empty, but deliveries still come at night. Maintenance crews arrive on a schedule nobody can explain. And when people get too close, security cars appear out of nowhere, telling them they're trespassing on private land. On paper, it's owned by a charitable trust, the same trust that once claimed to protect vulnerable children. The same trust whose board members were photographed wearing that gold seal ring. But here's where it gets strange. The house itself is laid out like no ordinary home. Blueprints recovered from county records show hallways that go nowhere. Rooms with no exterior windows, a basement bigger than the entire ground floor, with sections marked simply as storage. Even more disturbing, the placement of the house isn't random. When you overlay its location with old maps of missing persons cases from the 1950s and 60s, a geometric pattern starts to emerge. Not a cluster, not a coincidence, a deliberate shape, like someone was drawing on the map with human lives. And the symbol? That same triangle inside a circle, it appears carved into the stone lintel over the side entrance. Weather-worn, barely visible, unless you know where to look, but it's there, the mark of the ring, the mark of the network. Every investigator who ever stepped foot on this property was either pulled off the case or forced to sign paperwork sealing their findings. County records show at least 3 separate police reports tied to this estate, all of them lost or misfiled. Ask yourself, what kind of power can erase entire police files for 65 years? What kind of power can turn a house into a tomb no one dares open? And here's the worst part. People still hear things at night near the tree line, voices, faint lights in the basement windows, which raises a terrifying question. Is this place just a relic of old crimes, or is it still being used? In 1998, long before the boy in the box had a name, a local urban explorer went inside the estate. He wasn't a cop, not an investigator, just a kid with a flashlight and a taste for forbidden places. He told his friends he wanted to see if the rumors were true. They never saw him again. At first, nobody connected it to the old murder case. Police chalked it up to a runaway. Ironic, isn't it? But 2 months later, his camera was found in a pawn shop 20 miles away. The roll of film inside was never made public, but one officer who handled it swore under oath that there were photos, not just of dusty hallways, but of rooms staged like someone was still using them. Children's shoes lined neatly against a wall, a chair bolted to the floor, a single light bulb burning above an empty mattress. The officer who made that statement was fired within a week. His home was raided for unrelated charges, his credibility destroyed, his name dragged through the mud. But here's the part nobody talks about. Before he disappeared from public view, he gave one interview off the record. He said the basement of that mansion wasn't empty at all. He said it looked alive. The boy's parents hired a private investigator who retraced his steps.
That man swore he found the gate unlocked one night. He went inside. He said he heard humming, like a generator, or maybe voices, coming from below ground. But when he tried to open the basement door, it was padlocked from the inside. Think about that. Who locks a door from the inside of an abandoned house? The investigator barely made it out. He says a black SUV cut him off as he pulled onto the main road. Two men in suits got out, showed no badges, no ID. They told him if he valued his family, he'd forget what he saw. And he did. For 20 years. Until last year, when he started talking again, and then suddenly vanished, just like the boy who went inside. So what's really in that basement? And more importantly, who's still protecting it after all these years?
Stop for a second and think about this. How many children go missing every year in America? Thousands. How many names do you actually hear? A handful. Just the ones they choose to tell you about. If Joseph Augustus Zarelli could be erased for 65 years, if his face could lie cold and nameless in a box while the world kept spinning, what does that say about the rest? The ones who never even get a case file, never make the evening news, never trend online for a single day. You walk through crowded streets every morning, you scroll past hundreds of faces on your feed every night. Do you really know who vanishes in between? Or do you only know the ones they let you know? And here's the part no one likes to admit. This isn't just about children. People disappear at every age, every class, every city. Sometimes they're found, sometimes they're not. And sometimes, when they are found, they're not given back their names. Think about the systems you trust. Law enforcement, government agencies, media outlets. The ones you think would sound the alarm if you were taken. What if those systems are the very ones that decide who matters and who doesn't? Who gets a name and who stays a number in a cold file cabinet? Close your eyes for just a second and picture this. It's you or your brother or your son. No one answers your calls. No reporters come knocking. The search party never starts because it's never approved. Your name never makes the list because someone decided it shouldn't. And while your family screams into the void for answers, the void swallows the sound, until your face too fades away into nothing but a case number. You think this couldn't happen to you because you're careful, because you're aware, because you stay in good neighborhoods. But Joseph was just a boy. Innocence doesn't protect you. The truth is, the system doesn't protect you either. The only real question is, how many names are already buried in silence, waiting for someone to dig them back up? You've been told Joseph's death was random, a single act of cruelty by some nameless monster. But what if it wasn't random at all? What if it followed a pattern, one that's been hiding in plain sight? Look at the date his body was found, February 25th, 1957. That date aligns with other cases in the region, cases where children were taken or bodies appeared, sometimes miles apart, yet within days of each other. Coincidence? That's what they want you to think. Investigators at the time dismissed any link between the cases. But decades later, analysts noticed something chilling. The locations form geometric shapes on a map. Not random scatter, but deliberate placement, like points on a ritual grid. And it doesn't stop there. Joseph's body wasn't left in the woods or dumped in water like most child victims of that era. It was placed in a box, neat, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The body was carefully cleaned, hair crudely cut, nails trimmed. Why? That's not how impulsive killers operate. That's how someone sends a message. Some believe it was a signature, part of an ongoing sequence only a few were meant to understand. In ancient traditions, boxes and containers were used to seal things, not just objects, but spirits, memories, identities. It's almost as if whoever did this wanted to erase Joseph twice, first as a person, then as a symbol. Even stranger, the area where the box was found was later discovered to line up with an old survey boundary, land once owned by families tied to Philadelphia's elite. Families who sat on boards, who funded institutions, who had the power to make police reports vanish and witnesses change their stories.
And here's the detail they'll never put on television. Joseph wasn't the only one. There were other children in the 50s and 60s who vanished around Philadelphia under similar circumstances. No box, no name, no Tice. But when you plot them on a map, the points form something that looks less like chaos and more like design. The question is, design by who? And what were they marking out on that city, like carving symbols into the earth itself? When you dig into Joseph's case, the official record reads clean, almost too clean. But history isn't clean, and neither are the people who write it. In the late 1950s, locals came forward claiming they saw something. A car parked near the road, a man carrying a box, a woman screaming into the night. But each account contradicts the next. Some swore it was a blue sedan. Others insisted it was green. One man even said he saw a station wagon with government plates. Which is it? Are they all wrong? Or are they all right? But someone rewrote the script. Years later, a social worker claimed she knew who Joseph was, long before DNA ever confirmed his name. She pointed to a foster home not far from where his body was found. She said she saw the boy, bruised and terrified, months before he vanished. Police took her statement, and then it disappeared. Gone from the case file, like it was never written. And what about the photographs? Original crime scene photos, taken in '57, reportedly went missing from police archives. When some reappeared decades later, they were cropped, altered, pieces of the box cut out, angles of the body missing. Who edits evidence unless they're hiding something? Even Joseph's own family history raises questions. When DNA confirmed his identity, some expected his relatives to speak out, to demand justice, but many stayed silent. Some even refused to comment at all. Was it shame or fear? And fear of what? Look closely, and you'll see a pattern that reeks of institutional rot. Witness statements vanish. Leads go cold for no reason. Records are lost during office moves. Key people retire early, take sudden transfers, or die in accidents. It's not incompetence, it's control. If the truth about Joseph threatens to expose something deeper, something that touches powerful names, how far would they go to keep it buried? Ask yourself this. If there is, I could erase a boy for 65 years. What else could they erase? A murder weapon? A witness? Maybe even an entire trail of victims that no one is supposed to count. When a crime looks too neat, too careful, it stops being a crime of passion and starts looking like a message. Joseph wasn't just discarded, he was displayed. The box wasn't trash, it was a container, a seal. In old traditions, containers weren't just to hold things. They were to bind things, to trap something inside, or to mark it for those who understood the code. Hair crudely cut, nails trimmed, body washed. Every trace of identity stripped away. Not just to hide him from the world, but to strip him of himself. And why here? Why this quiet edge of Philadelphia, along a road no one traveled at night? Look at a map of where Joseph was found. Follow the old property lines. You'll see it. His resting place sits near a forgotten survey point. Land once controlled by names you never see on police reports, but always see on building plaques and museum wings. If you think that's coincidence, remember this. Patterns speak louder than evidence. Evidence you can burn. Patterns you can't. Some researchers believe the location, the date, even the way Joseph was posed. These weren't random. They were symbolic. They matched other disappearances. Children who vanished around the same years, whose cases were brushed off as runaways or accidents. But if you plot them, you get more than dots. You get lines, shapes, like someone carving sigils into the dirt, using human lives as ink. And that box, maybe it wasn't just to hide him. Maybe it was a calling card, a signal to whoever was supposed to see it, a warning or a promise. Because powerful people have always used symbols to talk in public without ever saying a word. From secret societies to black-budget operations, messages are left where only insiders know how to read them. Joseph may have been part of that language, a word written in blood that only a few could understand. But if that's true, then this wasn't just murder. It was ritual, and rituals aren't random. They're repeated, which means Joseph might not have been the first, and he sure wasn't the last. You'd think something this horrifying would end with Joseph, that once a child is left in a box, the world would never allow it again. But history doesn't move forward, it circles back. Look at the missing persons reports in Pennsylvania through the 1960s and 70s. Look at New Jersey in the 80s. Look at Ohio in the 90s. Children vanishing, cases opened and closed without answers. On paper, they're all different. But when you strip away the noise, they rhyme. The same careful erasure. No fingerprints, no usable fibers. Parents too afraid or too confused to speak out. Bodies found in wooded lots, near old roads, in places where powerful men own the land, but never walk it themselves. And the symbols keep repeating. An old doll left near one scene. A pair of shoes placed too neatly near another. No one calls them symbols because no one wants to admit they're connected. Here's the part that should make your stomach turn. As recently as the 2000s, bodies of unidentified children have appeared in containers, a plastic bin, a suitcase, a storage trunk, modern boxes for a modern age. And just like Joseph, they remain unknown, unclaimed, unspoken. Authorities call them tragedies. I call them signatures. Ask yourself why. Why do some missing kids dominate headlines for months, while others vanish from the record in days? Why do some cases attract federal task forces, while others barely make local news? Is it random? Or is someone deciding who gets remembered and who gets erased? You think you're safe because you're older, because you're not the target. But power doesn't just erase children. Power erases witnesses. Power erases anyone who asks the wrong questions. And here's the worst part. The trail doesn't end in the past. These patterns are alive right now. Somewhere out there, another Joseph is waiting. Another child marked, stripped of their name, sealed in a contour. Inner that will sit in the dark until some stranger stumbles across it decades later. Unless you start seeing the lines, unless you start noticing the shapes carved into history with innocent blood. This isn't over. It never was. Whenever someone gets too close to the truth, the machine grinds into motion. You've seen it before. Whistleblowers ruined, journalists silenced, researchers branded as lunatics. The same thing happened to anyone who ever tried to connect Joseph's death to a larger pattern. Look through old archives and you'll find the evidence of erasure. Detectives reassigned, files lost in transfer, witnesses who suddenly changed their story after a late-night meeting with federal consultants. And when independent investigators press harder, their reputations get shredded overnight. One man in the 1970s claimed Joseph was part of a child trafficking ring tied to prominent families. Within a month, his name was in the paper, but not for solving the case. They painted him as unstable, paranoid, even dangerous. His research disappeared, and so did he. This is how institutional power protects itself. It doesn't need to solve the crime. It only needs to bury it deeper than the victim. As long as the public sees Joseph as a tragic anomaly, a single spark in the dark, no one looks for the wildfire. And don't think this is just old history. Look at modern cases. When patterns surface, officials rush to explain them away. Coincidence? Unrelated? No credible evidence. The press echoes it, word for word, like someone handed them the script. But here's the question you have to ask yourself. Why spend so much energy telling you there's nothing to see, if there's really nothing to see? Why not just let you chase your crazy theories into the ground? Unless those theories aren't so crazy, unless they're dangerous. You can feel it even now, can't you? Listening to this, you feel eyes on you, like you're prying into something you weren't supposed to touch. That's how it works. That's how they control you. Not through force, through fear. If you're afraid to even think about it, you'll never speak about it. And if no one speaks, Joseph stays buried, not just in the ground, but in memory. They didn't just kill a boy. They built a cage of silence around him, and every time someone rattles that cage, the machine wakes up to make sure it stays locked. Stop thinking of this as Joseph's story. This is your story now. The second you hear it, you're inside it, because the same forces that erased him erase anyone who starts looking too closely. Do you feel it yet? That tension in your chest, like someone else is in the room with you, even if you're alone? That isn't paranoia. That's awareness. Once you see the cage, you start to notice its bars everywhere. Think about it. How many times have you read about a missing child and then never heard another word? How many names never even reach the news? If Joseph could be erased for 65 years, what about the ones you'll never even know existed? And it's not just children. Adults disappear all the time. Journalists chasing the wrong lead, researchers digging through classified archives, ordinary people who witness something they weren't meant to see. Every one of them becomes a tragedy, a mystery, an unsolved case. Different labels, same result. Silence. This is where you stop being a spectator, because right now, by listening, by thinking, you're doing something most men never dare to do. You're pushing against the wall, and when you push hard enough, the wall pushes back. Here's what they don't want. They don't want you connecting dots across decades, across state lines, across official narratives. They don't want you asking why so many records vanish, why witnesses retract, why bodies appear in places linked to power, but power never answers for them. You're starting to see how deep it goes, aren't you? Good. But understand this, knowledge always has a price. The more you know, the less you can pretend this is someone else's problem. The more you know, the more you realize you're already inside the game. If you've made it this far, write this phrase in the comments twice. I see the pattern. Do it now, not for me, for you, to mark the moment you stopped being a bystander, to show the machine you're awake. This isn't a story you just watch. It's a door, and once it opens, there's no closing it again. If you want proof that Joseph's case was never meant to be solved, follow the trail they forgot to erase. There's always something left behind, not because they're careless, but because they think you'll never look for it. There's an old building on the outskirts of Philadelphia, a crumbling brick institution, its windows boarded, its name scrubbed from most public records. Decades ago, it housed children, wards of the state, kids with no families to claim them, kids no one would miss. It was shut down in the early 1960s after funding irregularities, but some of the files from that place never made it into the official archives. Buried deep in county land records, you'll find a transfer deed, signed by names you've never heard, backed by organizations you definitely have. The paper trail jumps jurisdictions, the way it always does when someone powerful doesn't want to be seen. The timing matches the years Joseph would have been alive. Why does that matter? Because people who worked there swore children vanished from that facility long before it closed. They were told to forget what they saw. Some of those employees died in accidents that never made sense. Others stopped talking. Even now, if you drive out there, locals will tell you not to go near it after dark. They say strange lights appear in the upper windows, doors slam when there's no wind. Some call it haunted. But what if it isn't haunted? What if it's guarded? No mainstream report has connected Joseph to that place. Not one. But the location of the box where his body was found lines up almost perfectly with the old road system leading straight from that institution. Too neat to be chance. too silent to be coincidence. And here's the breadcrumb. The road still exists. So does the building. And if you search property records hard enough, the name on that deed is still out there. Ask yourself, where is?
Why is no one talking about it? Why hasn't it been demolished? Who's protecting it? I'm not telling you to go there. I'm telling you to think about why you feel afraid even hearing about it.
That fear isn't yours. It's theirs, projected into you. The best control is when they make you police yourself. This is where the story ends for Joseph, but where it begins for you. Because the boy in the box was never just a victim. He was a warning. A message sent in cardboard and silence. They told you it was an unsolved murder. They told you it was a mystery. But that's a lie dressed up as a bedtime story, meant to keep you calm while the wolves circle the campfire. 65 years later, they gave you a name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli, as if naming him closes the book. But that's not an ending. That's a signature. Now you've seen the cracks in their world. You've felt them staring back at you through the page. The question is, what do you do with it? Do you turn away and pretend you didn't hear? Or do you let it brand itself into your mind so you can never forget? If they can erase a child for 6 decades, how long before they erase a man like you? Before your story disappears in an empty file cabinet, another unsolved case, another statistic in a system built on forgetting? You have a choice now. You can walk away, or you can mark this moment, speak his name, comment it twice below. Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Let them see that someone is still watching, that someone still cares. Because here's the truth. They'll never say out loud. They don't fear evidence. They don't fear DNA tests or cold case units. They fear memory. They fear men who refuse to look away. This isn't just about a boy in a box. This is about every secret they've buried in the dirt, every voice they've silenced, every truth they've wrapped in plastic and filed away under classified. You've walked down into the darkness with me. You've seen what they wanted you to miss. So now you have to decide. Are you just a tourist in this shadow world, or are you awake now? Because once you're awake, there's no going back. Joseph's name lives if we speak it. His story breathes if we refuse to bury it again. Comment it now. Speak it now, because silence is how they win. And tonight, we break the silence.